As the battle against COVID-19 continues in Canada, there has been much frustration from physicians and provincial governments as to the lack of a consistent and adequate supply of COVID vaccines. Canada seems to be dependent on receiving vaccines from other nations, but an Alberta company plans to change that. Joining me today from Edmonton is Andrew MacIsaac. He's the CEO of Applied Pharmaceutical Innovation, or API. Andrew, thank you for joining us. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Absolutely. Now, Andrew, can you first of all tell us a little bit about API? This is a not-for-profit organization, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So API is a not-for-profit institute that's focused on the commercial development of discoveries in the life sciences, predominantly pharmaceuticals and drugs. And what we do is we provide the sort of boots on the ground technical capability for folks who come up with a new discovery to turn that discovery into something that is a reality, something that we can take that saves lives, be it an anti-cancer medicine or a vaccine.
Okay, now many Canadians would agree that we need to stop relying on China and other countries to supply our medical needs because it just doesn't make sense. So I understand that the government of Alberta recently announced that they're wanting investors to come forward with proposals to develop and manufacture COVID vaccines in Alberta. So is the government putting tax dollars into this as well? Because your company is involved with this, right?
Yeah, so we're very, very happy about the focus of the government on looking at this issue very seriously and investing to ensure that we're able to have a secure supply. The proposal process closed a few weeks ago, and right now there is the ongoing sort of due diligence on proposals that have gone forward. And we're hoping, we're working with a lot of the vaccine manufacturers here in the province to hopefully establish capacity. So, from our standpoint, I do think that the government really needs to invest in the infrastructure for us to be able to manufacture here. And that's really what's happened in other jurisdictions that have been successful in manufacturing their own vaccines. There has been governments at the table providing that catalyst. For us, if we get our facility up and running, we'll be able to do the fill finish for vaccines from established pharma as well as local companies like Entos and Providence Therapeutics. So there's a real critical need here, and it sounds like there's some attention being given.
Okay, now are these Alberta-based companies? Do we have Alberta-based companies that have a vaccine at the center stage of development waiting for approval from Health Canada?
So we have two main companies within the province that are focused on vaccines for COVID-19. There's Providence Therapeutics in Calgary and Entos Pharmaceuticals here in Edmonton. And both of them are in phase one of clinical trials. So they're doing the safety testing of their products, and the pathway to having a drug on the market will likely take another year for some of these. But with COVID-19, it's very key that we focus on looking to the future, because if you start talking to us, about a year ago, many people were saying, "Oh yeah, things will be all settled by now." But here we are going into another third wave. So I think it's key that we invest now so that we aren't stuck with more shutdowns and lockdowns and no restrictions.
Yeah, exactly. It's just getting to be a little much, isn't it? So you would like to have a manufacturer of COVID vaccines here in Alberta. Now, do you have a building or a production facility for this? Is it already finished? Does it have a ways to go yet?
So API manufactures, prior to the pandemic, we manufacture for clinical trials. So companies that have a novel drug, we produce them for the clinical trial stage. And what we're looking to do is expand out our capacity so that we can produce for the market stage. So rather than us producing thousands of doses of a drug, we want to be able to produce millions, and we want to be able to produce them relatively quickly. And so our goal is, if we get this capacity up and running, we can either manufacture vaccines produced by some of the current large pharma companies, as well as vaccines produced by our local pharmaceutical companies. So we've sort of hedged our bets from that aspect by having that neutral capacity that enables in province production. So that's sort of what we focused on from that standpoint. If we get funded, it'll still be months until we're fully up and running. But there's going to be a need, especially as new variants come online. That we should have this capacity here, because we don't want to be in a situation where a variant comes out and there needs to be a new vaccine, and we don't have the ability here. We'll be in the exact same boat we were in March of last year.
Yeah, totally. Now, you'd mentioned months and you'd also mentioned a year possibly for a vaccine to be developed. But how long do you actually estimate to have everything in place? Health Canada approved, the vaccine, staff hired, everything up and running, still a year or more away?
Yeah, so for us, we're quite ahead of the pack in that we already have a Health Canada drug establishment license, because we do produce drugs for trials, and it was relatively easy for us to get that additional approval. For our facility, we'd have to add in additional staff and components, but that's something that we're quite used to doing, because we are a company that helps life science companies grow and scale their operations. So from that aspect, we're well covered. In terms of when the facility will be pumping out vaccines, we'd probably be looking at early 2022. And that's probably the fastest you can get anything done. Anyone who says that they can do something like that sooner is, to be honest, not looking at the real or understanding the real challenges involved in vaccine manufacturing, because you really need to ensure that you've put this facility up in a way that is completely safe and compliant, and will ensure that the supply is exactly what we need. If it takes 6 months to build a house, think about how long it takes to build a vaccine manufacturing plant.
Now, Andrew, once everything is up and running, how many vaccines could you possibly produce? Would this be enough for Alberta or for the whole country, or for even like other nations around the world? What are you looking at?
Yeah, so for us, we don't really see that there's a strong sort of economic standpoint to produce, at the world stage. What we really think that there's a sweet spot that Alberta sits in, which is producing for the local market as well as for the early stage of new drugs. And what we would do is we'd have a facility that can produce about 4 million doses a month of vaccines. So, in a crunch where all of a sudden you need sudden capacity, within a couple of months, we'd be able to cover the whole province. And then that additional capacity can be used for both supporting, generic drugs that are in shortages with AHS, as well as broader Canadian market access. And as these companies that are using our facility grow, they're then able to invest in that larger scale infrastructure to talk about the global market.
Yeah. Now, I'm just curious, by early 2022, won't everybody have already supposedly been vaccinated already for COVID-19? So who do you think this is going to reach? And do you think other variants will appear by then and making your vaccine obsolete, or is it going to cover? I mean, some variants might not even be in existence yet, or in existence
Yeah,
yet. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
this is the problem, is we don't really know. One thing we do know is it's very likely that we'll continue to need annual or biannual booster shots for COVID-19 vaccine. So that will be a big challenge. The new variants coming out will continue to be a challenge. There's also the broader need within the healthcare system for security of supply of some critical medicines. About 20% of pharmacists' time here is used chasing down drug shortages. And we see it even in terms of when COVID-19 hit and some drugs were switched to a 30-day supply because of concerns of shortages. If we have the ability to manufacture some of these in province, it'll alleviate those concerns. We've been able to stay away from having a large impact from those, but those have been issues that have dogged our healthcare system for the past 15, 20 years. And so this will also be able to provide a solution for those as well.
Yeah. So is the infrastructure in the COVID vaccine, could it be used to manufacture other pharmaceuticals?
Yes, absolutely. So it's tailored as a flexible site that could do everything from the drugs that you need to be put under for surgery, to drugs to vaccines, and stuff that's coming out of our universities. So the work of Michael Houghton, the Nobel laureate, the work of researchers at the University of Calgary and Lethbridge, would all be able to manufacture their potential drugs here, and it would provide a relatively large leg up for innovators within Alberta and within Canada, to be able to move through clinical trials. So that would be a huge benefit from the facility, which we really see as the primary sort of longer term piece. Because the big issue for us here is a pandemic comes along and everyone invests in something, but then if you don't have a usage for it afterwards, it gets mothballed. Whereas what we're proposing is something that will provide immediate relief for the pandemic, but also has a very long-term usage. So, down the road, if hopefully it doesn't happen, but if it does, there's another pandemic. We've got that capacity, and it's current and it's operating, and we can quickly pivot it to address concerns.
So, Andrew, if a bright entrepreneur or medical student or doctor has a great idea on how to solve a health problem, can they contact API for help in developing their idea?
Absolutely. So API is focused on building the life sciences sector here within the province. We actually do projects across Alberta. We have researchers we work with at the University of Lethbridge, the University of Calgary, and the University of Alberta. And we're always looking to support them as they undertake their commercialization. I'd welcome anyone who's interested in moving forward with an idea or discovery they have within their scientific lab to reach out to us, because that's really what our role is to enable them to take that idea and move it forward in a way that you typically find within the pharmaceutical industry.
Now, and they can reach out through your website?
Yes, so www.appliedpharma.ca.
Awesome. Well, Andrew, it looks like we are about out of time, but we look so forward to hearing more about this as things develop. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.